Welcome to the Stories in EDU podcast, the show where we talk with real educators and hear their powerful impact. Their stories will grab you, inspire you, and show you the reach of the work we do. And now, the Bretzman Group presents your hosts, Josh Goffe and Mandy Taylor.
Welcome back to another episode of Stories in EDU, the podcast where we share good stories about awesome things happening in classrooms all across the United States and the world. And we are into the 20s of this podcast, which is just amazing to think about at this point, but it's well short of where we think we can go because there's always so many stories. I mean, today even, and I think I shared this recently, I was at Buffalo Wild Wings and I ran into some former students and I didn't recognize any of them and it was like horrifyingly embarrassing. Well, I got part two today with that. I got a second chance, sort of. So I am running and training for a marathon. So today after school, I ran 7 miles. And then when I finished, I still had 0.4 kilometers left on an egg in Pokemon Go to hatch. So instead of going home, I took a lap around the block to hatch it before I got home. Don't laugh. Just go with it.
There's so many reasons I love you, Josh, in that whole story. There's so many.
And I made the second Pokemon Go reference, I think, on this podcast, so that's good. In any case, so I'm walking around the block, and then this car drives up, like really slowly. And so I'm walking down the sidewalk, and then there's this street alongside me. I'm on the right side of the sidewalk, and the street, whatever. It's weird perspective. I'm weirding out by seeing myself on the camera. In any case, so I'm walking down the sidewalk and this car is driving really slowly and it like stops at where this like road crosses in front of the side road and they like stop and they sit there for a while. And so I'm just walking. I'm not really looking. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Like, are they going to turn? Like, this is going to be awkward. Like, if I get up to the corner and they're like still sitting there, I'm like, what are they doing? And then they did the thing that I was most concerned about is they turned and then we're like in front of the sidewalk that I am, approaching. I have to cross the side road to go to the other part of the sidewalk. And I'm looking in the car. I'm like, oh God, like they're kids. Like, are they going to like sit there and like give me crap for my walking form or whatever? Like, I don't even know. Or maybe they saw us playing Pokemon Go. They were going to say something funny. I honestly didn't know what to expect. And I'm looking, I'm like, am I supposed to know them? Like, and I have my earbuds in. I can't hear a thing. Like, I can tell they're starting to talk. And I'm like, I got nothing. So I pull them out. And the kid in the passenger seat's like, Mr. Goffe? And I'm looking, Brady. And the name came to me. And I actually remembered a name. And he was with Brody, who was another kid. And they were crazy back in middle school when I last taught them. It's been 4 years since I've seen them. But I remember their names and we chatted for a little bit, found out they're both going to college, which is awesome to hear, especially for Brody, because I know middle school was not an exceptional time for him. But I knew he was capable. So it's just great to see and still kind of awkward to have that conversation with students you haven't seen in forever. Like, what do you talk about? But so I got like my second chance and I didn't completely mess it up. So anyways, that was way too long of a story. But,
not at all. No, but I get what you mean. I just came from the NJHS ceremony that my son is an 8th grader and they just had their, I guess, renewal ceremony or thing. And I was sitting there and watching him but then the way we were sitting, every kid that got their little certificate and their pen and were walking directly towards where we were sitting. And I was like, I taught that kid, and it was 7th and 8th grade. So there were even more that I either taught myself or colleagues of mine have taught. And, it's just, that's one of the things I love about working in this community, even though sometimes it's, like you said, sometimes it's awkward and sometimes it's like, I just want some time. But it really is neat to see kids that I taught when they were 7, getting their little NHS pen at, 14. And it's just it's so cool to get to stay connected. And they would come over and Miss Taylor and, hug. And it's exciting. So our guest tonight. So I'm so excited to have Halley Ortiz on the podcast with us tonight. My friend Halley and I have worked together for 2 years as instructional coaches. And then we actually were really connected we met on a committee that we were both on, right? I think we
were on both of them.
Remember that committee? And that's kind of where
the ill-fated, like the
yes, and I was elementary and she was secondary. We got to visit and talk, and very instantly kind of, I think, knew that we were very kindred spirits in two different kind of realms. And so anyway, she is back in the classroom now, and so I'm so excited to kind of to celebrate her journey. And just kind of the small part of it that I've gotten to witness, and I'm just so excited. Halley, you will introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got where you are and what you're doing, and we'll go from there.
Sure. My name is Halley Ortiz. I am back in the classroom after a couple years of push-in sort of quasi-coaching support, and then a couple years as an instructional coach at the district level. I got here. I guess how I got here is the same way that I got here originally. I was a lawyer by trade, practiced law for 10 years, part-time, full-time, kind of on and off, and obviously didn't love it. Hence the change in careers. I think mostly what happened is there was a great principal at my kids' school, and I was sort of hovering around the outskirts of all of that and working with the PTA and up there doing a little bit of tutoring. And Dolores sat me down in a chair and said, "What are you doing with your life?" And I may or may not have sobbed. I don't know. I just don't want to go back. And I listened to my kids. And now they're, anyway, she said, "You need to go down to Texas State. They have a post-baccalaureate program. I'm going to call so-and-so, and I'm going to tell them you're coming. You are meant for this job." And I had taught middle school Sunday school for like 11 billion years. And so that whole vibe of where it's like you get to meet a new person every day because they're in middle school, really spoke to me, And I had some issues in 7th grade. And Josh, your whole thing running into your students and not knowing who they are, I've made like 52 connections and my brain is sort of like this. So just make sure you bring me back around. But I had a very difficult experience in middle school. And I think kind of wherever that difficult experience was, for those of us that are teachers, often that's kind of the grade level-ish that we go back to. So I did a certificate and master's program and started teaching. This is my 12th year in education at a Title I middle school. And I was a 7th grade ELA teacher for a really long time, and then took a little bit of time off. My mom got real sick and I was trying to go back and forth to Houston, so I had to help out with that. And then when I came back doing ESL support work, teaching an ESL class, and then also providing push-in support in different classrooms in the content areas. And what I really liked was kind of the overlap between kids reading and kids learning. Because let's be honest, there's reading in science. And there's reading. What? Stop.
Wait a minute.
Wait, hold on just a sec. Wait, it's not all on the PowerPoint? Wait, I'm sorry. Can we just show the video?
Yes.
And so it was really powerful for me to see where my skills in reading could help support kids in math and science and social studies. So I have my ESL certification, really became passionate about that and became passionate about the levels of support that kids need. And what's interesting, okay, is there a question or do I need to stop talking?
No, you go.
Okay, am I good? Okay, well, what I was going to say that was so interesting that I loved when I was working with Mandy was in elementary, we are so much better about allowing the kids to do the work. And then when we go to secondary and we got to get them ready for STAR and EOCs, and there's so much content that we have to deliver to them that it's harder, I think, to relinquish control and allow kids to actually work. And so that, to me, and I'm going to tell you, going back to the classroom, has completely slapped me upside the head. But making sure that the kids are the ones doing the work, because if you're a second language learner and you don't have the opportunity to play around and practice and all the Marzano's things and think about it and draw it and make context out of it and build it into the context that you already have, that's why so many of our kids become long-term ELLs. They just don't ever get enough practice time. It's like the kids it was like why I was always on C-team volleyball. I mean, there's no such thing as C-team volleyball anymore. So anyway, that's kind of where I got. I spent 2 years as a district instructional coach under the absolutely fantastic Alejandro Gongora, and I grew so much, but I got into this to be with kids. I love kids so much, and at the risk of getting too woo-woo in it, God's purpose for me is kids, and I'm a control freak, but that's it's fine.
Well, and Halley and I actually live near each other, and we've spent time walking kind of the streets of our neighborhood, having these long discussions about teaching and how the work that she's done and is doing with middle school kids very similarly mirrors the work I had done with 6 and 7-year-olds. And then, so one of the things I wrote down is kind of what you're saying. With a reading background, you're able to enter kind of the content through that reading background. And what I found in my particular journey is having taught first grade for 12 years equipped me for teaching third grade in ways that I never knew, because I knew exactly what the plan was if a kid started struggling, because I knew how to teach reading. It's so technical. It has to do with phonemic awareness and phonics and phonology and miscue analysis. There's so many technical parts of teaching reading that it doesn't matter if the kid's 9 or 12 or 4 or 17. If you're learning how to read, these are things that you need to have. These are building blocks.
Yeah, and that's, oh, sorry, go.
No, I was just going to say, so that I knew third grade didn't intimidate me because I knew what the content was new, but I knew what to do to support. So I think sometimes having that view is helpful to, I think that a lot of our upper elementary and middle school teachers would learn so much from some basic reading classes, some PD on actually teaching just even the mechanics of it.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. And I think that was the absolute miracle of the ESL job that I got, is that I actually got hired to be the reading intervention teacher. Mm-hmm. And in the brief 3-week window before my job kind of shape shifted.
Yes.
I don't know. Anyway, I was talking about the last scene in Harry Potter today, where in the movie he kind of pixelates into nothingness, and I'm like, it's the worst ending, because the worst thing he wanted was to be mortal. Anyway, I digressed, but that was sort of what happened to my job, is it shapeshifted. But before it changed into ESL, I went to a 2-week training on the 5 reading components: phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. The big one, the important one that I forgot. Anyway, what was so fascinating and so illuminating for me is, if your gap is in X, if you don't fill the gap, all that happens is the reading gets longer and harder. And so we have kids coming to middle school, and it was so illuminating, because I'm beating my head up against the wall trying to teach comprehension skills when I've got kiddos that don't know how to decode. And I had a fantastic education. I went to Texas State, shout out if you got a kid in college, fantastic education program. But I was 4.8, right? So mine was all building content and all of that kind of stuff. I would have been more effective in my earlier teaching years. And I was good. I was fine. It wasn't, I'm not, except for that, my 4th period class, my first year, I do want to make some calls to them to apologize, but bless their hearts. But to know and be able to find those gaps, those fluency gaps, I'm having to read so slowly because I'm decoding every single word that I can't make inferences, because I'm so busy trying to make meaning out of each individual word. Or, I'm not even decoding. But those gaps, continuing to give harder reading material to kids doesn't really help. And then when you think about the ESL student coming in, the gaps get so much bigger, because if you think K-2, and I know this is kind of old school stereotype, but K-2 is learning to read. 3-5 is reading to learn. If you've got a kid who comes in to the United States, 3rd grade or after, they're not getting basic phonics. They're not getting all of that. So all those words that you're saying, they don't have any letter sound correspondence for in English, especially like your blends and all that kind of stuff. So because we aren't grabbing those gaps 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, when the students ought to start moving away from basic speech and into your more complex academic speech, your CALP. If I like to use the abbreviations because we like to use the
the acronyms. Oh yes.
Thank you. Oh, I'm a big fan.
Yes.
MNOP. But once they start moving into that academic speech 4, 5, 6, 7 years in, if they've still got phonemic awareness gaps because of just the difference between Spanish and English, Vietnamese and English, Arabic and English, or whatever, those gaps just grow because we're not doing anything to close the gap.
Right.
And so seeing that and having that little bit of knowledge is absolutely fundamental. And to find some way at secondary that seems like there could be an hour PD that we could figure out what's like, hey, here's a cute little thing. We can do it. They'll be dancing. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Well,
Halley, earlier you mentioned had something about like the transition from coaching, I guess, for 2 or 3 years.
Two, but honestly, I was push-in support and did some kind of quasi coaching before I became a real coach.
Okay. So then that transition back into the classroom this year, and then I also know that it was a shift in districts. So I think sometimes there's all new, every district has its own set of things that people have to learn, their culture, their procedure systems. So talk a little bit about what this year has looked like for you professionally, and then just kind of personally what it's done to your brain.
There's a reason you're laughing as you ask this question.
Tell me. No.
It has been the most incredibly humbling experience, because I can tell you, and I know Mandy and I have had this conversation, that as a coach, the hubris, as I say this out loud, I'm going to apologize to everyone. Every teacher I worked with was absolutely fantastic. So I'm fully aware of the hubris of what I'm about to say, that as a coach, I would say, well, I don't know why we don't just do this. Let me tell you why teachers aren't doing this, because it's that plus 957 other things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I had forgotten. I turned 50 this year, and so I'm completely willing to own that the old lady hormones and the weird brain stuff and whatever. I'm not old. I just look like it. But and I was sitting there going, maybe I'm just too old for this job. Maybe it's just it. And I'm not sure if that's the case, or if since I left the, regular size classroom to go into ESL support and do push in and do smaller intervention type classes, has it just been that long? Was I just old? And I'm like, I think it's probably a combination of all of the above, but I will tell you the number of initiatives and the number of things that we're trying to do to fix things and to catch up is making it really hard to feel like you're doing anything really well.
Mm-hmm.
I always have to think about this, but inch deep, mile wide a little bit. And I've saw that in our district. I still call it our district because my kids are K-12 graduates of this district, worked most of my career there, love my new district. But I think everybody's trying to figure out how to help and create successful kids from an increasingly diverse, increasingly high needs populations. I'm at a Title I school. I've always worked at a Title I school. And that's where my passion is. That's what my calling really is. But our kids are getting more and more diverse. The gaps are bigger. The kids on the opposite end of the spectrum need more help and more support because there's so much neat stuff out there for them to do and learn and grow. And then the constant switching of the accountability system in our state, which Lord, that's the other podcast that we can have. But and the testing and the benchmarking and all of that it's, you know, I have been incredibly humbled by all the stuff that I don't feel like I've done very well this year. And I'm a good teacher. I'm not, this is not me sort of questioning myself kind of from a calling standpoint and from a passion standpoint, but from just the sheer number of things. Some are dropping off, and I was never a person who let stuff drop off.
Yeah.
But it's a lot. We're asking a lot of our teachers right now. Now, that doesn't mean I don't love it, and that doesn't mean I don't want to do it, but it is, as somebody coming out of coaching and saying those words, well, I don't understand why we don't just do blank. Well, that's why.
Well, and I totally agree with that, in that I had my own, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, I wasn't, when I made the decision to pursue coaching, you know, to interview for a coaching position, I didn't make that decision because I was ready to leave the classroom, but I was ready for a new challenge professionally, and without going to a different grade level. You know, I knew this was something I wanted to do. I was fascinated with professional development, interested in systems and things like that. But I see too I almost wish there was, I could like coach for a year and then teach for a year, coach for a year and then teach for a year, something, have some sort of continuity, because even 3 years out, there are days, like yesterday was one of those days for me when I just felt like, I am not impacting anybody. I am not doing, you know, I put all these things in, no, it's crunch time. Let me know how I can support you. And I was trying to like myself out to the masses, and it was just like crickets. And I felt like I'm not doing anything. I'm not impacting anybody. I'd rather just, you know. And then today, like 6 different people stopped me to ask me something, ask for help, ask for support, email me about a kid. What could I do here? Can I come, you know? And it was, and then I started thinking, I was like, we're doing this, you know, that my timeline and my perspective is so different because I didn't have to answer parent emails. I didn't have to, you know, I mean, it's a different kind of work. And it was funny because I was just like, yesterday, I feel like my job is always like, I never know what I'm going to be doing. It's, you know, always back and forth. But that impact piece, I want to impact people, you know, I want to impact teachers. I want to impact, and it's funny. It's like yesterday I felt like I wasn't, today I felt like I did, you know, and tomorrow I'll try again. And, you know, but every once in a while, like I do the same thing. I kind of get like, why, you know, whatever. And then I'm like, oh, hang on. Like, remember who you are, remember where you came from, remember in the first place. And so I think having those conversations with teachers and staying so connected, that's why we've done a lot of interviews now, but the ones with classroom teachers are the ones to me that it's not that anybody's story is more valuable than someone else's, but the stories from the classrooms and the people doing the work, like you said, you know, we're just a lot of our teachers. And I think that kind of what, Josh, when we interviewed LaToya Dixon, and her book, her entire book is about what we're asking teachers to do and how we get burned out and we get beat up and we, you know, and what do we then do to respond, to support our kids, to support our profession, to support each other.
Well, and I think what you said, one of the stories that I was thinking about and reflecting on what I might talk about, I have a kind of a unique role at the school that I'm currently teaching in, the school in which I am currently teaching. So I got to do that right. I am both a reading and a writing teacher with all of the kids who are in reading intervention, and all the other reading teachers and writing teachers have an entire class period. So I'm teaching the lowest kids in both reading and writing in half the time. And it is exactly as wackadoo and fantastic and hilarious as you would think it was. And they are great. I mean, these are kids who haven't felt successful since second grade. And I feel like we have made an enormous amount of growth and an enormous amount of progress. But the problem is, since I teach them reading and writing, I've gotten pulled with all the reading teachers to help with 8th grade reading intervention because it's 3 weeks from STAR. I've also been pulled to be a Tell Pass rater because I'm a writing teacher. I've also been pulled to help with some general masterclass tutoring of my own students. And so all those things came down right before spring break. In addition to, I try to run to the extent I can an intervention type classroom where kids get some choice, and there are all centers where kids we circle back around and we do the same thing with a different stimulus, which requires a lot of upfront time to plan and all that stuff. And then, and so I must look awful because our instructional coach came up to me in the parking lot today after the faculty meeting, and she said, I know everybody is stretched really thin, and I haven't reached out to everybody, but I wanted to reach out to you and say, we completely understand how much you are trying to do. Is there anything I can do for you? And I was like, I think you just did it. I think just having some awareness of and an acknowledgement of what, just that it's hard and our kids really struggle and the support systems aren't there. And, we are trying to make sure that our kids feel safe and feel successful. And when a student is successful, I can tell you his name is Francisco. It was 2007. Kid had never passed a STAR in his whole life. It was the best day of my entire life, the day that we got to tell Francisco that he passed the STAR. And it was tax, whatever, which I don't even know.
It doesn't even
I've been
matter.
through 3 sets of state accountability tests. Woo! All right. Is there a medal? Is there like a watch?
There's a badge. I can give you a badge.
Yeah, I think we should, like a safety badge. Well, we don't need no stinking batches. Anyway, but it's just the acknowledgement of your commitment, is fundamental to me. And I'm not the type that needs, please don't come in my room every day and tell me how fabulous I am, because I think that's weird. But just an acknowledgement of, and I try to do, I remember, my kids are grown, but I remember trying to say, hey, I've been yelling at you about the dishwasher, but I really appreciate that you're keeping your grades up. And I don't think I did that very well as a parent either in looking back. But it's, and it's so much has me reflecting on how I approach things as a coach and how I am experiencing them as a teacher. It's been really illuminating.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those reasons I think I need to, because what came to yesterday is I was like, I know they need this XYZ, that whatever. Why don't I just do it and take it to them, and then they can kind of take it or leave it? And this morning at the copier, I was making a game for something that for another grade level, and one of the teachers said, "Oh, I love it when you give me stuff." And she was like, all the ideas, like it's things I wouldn't have thought about before or whatever. And it was one of those things where it's not that they're not reaching out to me. It's that they don't have, I am number 58 on the priority list. And so I have the space in my schedule to say, okay, how can I support someone today? Let me look at this grade level. Let me look at what they're working on. Let me look at this. Or if I look at a data set, I can tell this is a need, and kind of just flip the script a little bit on this model that I think coaching has to be in my head, and really kind of look at it from the perspective of service. And then that kind of can open up its own entry point into other conversations and deeper learning and, PD opportunities, or connecting teachers that aren't even me, but like, hey, this teacher at this campus, or this teacher in this, grade, or, that kind of thing. That it was really important to me today just to kind of go, you're thinking about things from a deficit model instead of what everybody is already doing really well.
Well, and I think that, but isn't that natural? I think for really motivated people, you might call us control freaks. You might call us perfectionists. Those are ugly, ugly terms. I prefer to think of it as highly motivated by fear. But you've got the people who are like that. You're exactly right. The asking for help is an acknowledgement of failure, right? And I'm talking about for me. But when you're super driven like this, sort of saying, yes, could you just please laminate this for me? That's really what would help me the most. And I'm like, I'm not going to ask an instructional coach to do something for me. But that's actually what I need, because where my to-do list is, I have to get the station ready because everything's predicated on this foundational lesson. But then if we don't suck, I'm an ESL teacher, so we talk with our hands. And it's fascinating to sort of watch yourself and your reaction to things, because it took me a while. Well, I mean, the first 6 weeks I just cried because I was like, what the heck? I don't remember teaching being like this, because you haven't been for 6 years, but that's fine because I hadn't been in a full-size classroom. But then it's the kind of toggling back and forth between, oh my God, I want to be so much better than I am and my best self, but I have the 58 things on my list to do. And some of it is, I think where I've gotten to, and Mandy, you were talking about your yesterday and today. My yesterday and today were similar, because yesterday I was sitting there going, perhaps I could just work at the Starbucks, which I know every teacher right after spring break, 3 weeks before STAR, decides to work at the Starbucks. Today I handled it, and I gave myself a little bit of grace. And I did say, when that coach asked me, I said, I could have your help, because it's the 58 things on the list. It's just the sheer fact that there are 58. And what I said to her was, will you just come and help me talk through how to prioritize it? Because I got to be okay with 56, 57, and 58 are probably not going to happen.
Right.
But of the 55, what are the 3 that have to happen first? What are the 3 that have to happen last? And we'll let the rest of them shake out. And I think that's, it's hard to ask for help, but it's also hard to let some stuff go. But it's also not physically possible to do
everything,
all the things, right? So, I think the idea of being okay with not checking every box off the list, I mean, because it's like, I have a planner that has boxes on it. Yes. We have the same planner. Yes, we do. So you can check the boxes off. And but if you think about it from an educator standpoint, that's not what we want our kids to do. We don't want our kids to check boxes off. We want our kids to think deeply and really experience and work deeply, and not check, not fill out the form to fill out the form, and not do the worksheet to do the worksheet. I want you to really think about, why does it matter if this guy wants you to do this? Well, because does he have a good argument? Because otherwise you're going to fall for whatever. You're going to buy the product that's a scam, And so, why would we want anything less for our kids when we're not willing, and we want to do less for ourselves? It's a strange.
It absolutely is very strange. Being a teacher puts you in a lot of just interesting positions, and the urgency and the importance of the role is really, it wears down on you. And that's exactly why we need to do this. We need to talk. We need to share about what's going on, the good, the bad, and the in-between, because that's what helps us get through this shared experience that we have. And we hope that this was enjoyable for you to be on the podcast.
Oh, I had a ball. Thank you.
And, from what I can tell, there's a lot more that we could go on about. So I hope you'd be interested in coming back at some point.
Oh, totally.
Excellent. Or, you two just start your own podcast, either way.
We would never, ever do that. I didn't even get to tell my funny story. That it's actually, here, Josh, super quick. When you were talking about the kid you didn't recognize, I was in the grocery store with this kid who had a baby and a boyfriend or a husband, and she's like, Miss Ortiz. I'm like, you have a baby. And I was like, he's like, yeah, this is my baby, and this is my husband, boyfriend, can't remember, super excited. And I'm like, oh, I so wish that she had finished high school, so I'm thinking this. And I said, well, I was like, how's school? She goes, well, I graduated 3 years ago, and I'm in college. And I'm like, oh, I thought she was like 16. And I had taught her like 9 years before that. So it's, sorry, I mean, and you just like but I knew exactly who she was, and I could tell you where she sat in my classroom and all of that. And so it's funny how they morph and they aren't recognizable
No.
always physically, but they are recognizable in their voice or in their mannerisms or whatever. So anyway, I totally resonated with your story.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. It's one of those things that I'll never forget the memories we made. I might forget what you look like because you changed so much in 4 years. I might forget your name, but I'm not going to forget all the stuff that happened that I remember you about. So excellent. Appreciate that little connection that you doubled back to at the end. That must have been like number 59 on your list.
It was all good. All good.
So we are going to wrap up as we always do with a quick round of game of stories. And I have drawn a very topical card tonight for us to discuss and tell a quick story about. Hold on. All right. So our card tonight is listen to a podcast. Tell a story about the podcast you listen to. Maybe it's this one. I don't know. What is your favorite podcast and why? Do you listen to any outside of your content area or grade level? For you, what makes a good podcast? So feel free to approach that prompt in any way that you want to. A minute is on the clock. I'll click start when you begin.
Okay. The podcasts that I'm listening to are almost all outside of education. But I really like the idea of being passionate about your craft. I listen to Alec Baldwin's Here's the Thing, slightly salty on the language, but he interviews business people, actors, singers, politicians, kind of about how they decided to do what they do and what makes them good at it and what are the challenges for it. It's brilliant. He interviewed Barbara Streisand, who was fantastic, and he also interviewed the recycling director and the waste water management person from the city of New York. Just fascinating stuff. I also love the West Wing Weekly because I'm a West Wing fan, but it is also about craft and weaves in politics. And then finally, Slow Burn is a small series that has really specific, really cool vignettes about the Watergate saga.
Interesting.
I've never finished on time in my entire life. That was fantastic.
Sweetness. See, not just for you, Mandy. It's for everybody.
It's typically for me only.
All right. Go ahead whenever you're ready, Mandy.
So I love the Cult of Pedagogy blog by Jen Gonzalez because anything she says is brilliant. That's my education podcast. And then the one that actually that I really enjoy is called Mortified. And basically it is adults telling their most embarrassing moments from when they were in junior high and high school. And it's actually, they've turned it into a series on Netflix. And so where they go kind of like into like nightclubs and do like stand-up basically, but it's just regular people talking about their most embarrassing stories. And the thing is that they're mortifying, but it's actually just, you're also actually, like everyone in middle school, high school has these mortifying, awful stories. And it's just so much about humor and humanity, and it's fantastic. You should listen to Mortified.
Excellent. I did check that out once, and it was very interesting. Wasn't sure if I was supposed to laugh at points or what I was supposed to do, but definitely interesting story.
It's cringeworthy.
Yeah, cringy. Yeah, the kids would be all over describing that one. All right, it is my turn. We're talking about something really cool that happened to me once, and I have no idea. I guess I'd thank Twitter and some happenstance luck. Back when I was last in the classroom, it was my last year in the classroom, I had a class that was called Digital Media Tools, and we did a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't do very well in any of it. But one of the things was app development. So for most students, we used MIT App Inventor, which was pretty fresh off the block at the time. However, I was the only one in the room with an Android phone, so anytime a student wanted to test their app, I had to like run around, quickly download it on my phone, and go from there. However, I had these other students that brought their own Macs to school, and so they coded an Xcode to put on iPhones. And we worked together for months to try and get this thing on iTunes. There's a whole story behind that. But anyways, through this process and tweeting about it, I actually got a chance to talk with Vicki Davis on her podcast, which was like a really cool experience. Yeah. There's more to that story, but a minute is too short. I should have picked something else.
I'm
Anyways.
not sure I understood any of those words. Was that English?
In there.
I don't know anything about coding.
What? Hallie and I are like,
Are we off?
MIT App Inventor allows you to make apps for Android phones.
Okay, so it was a computer class or a coding.
Yes, a computer
Awesome.
class.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that. Sometimes it's easier than to go to nuance. Hallie, we could go all night, but we probably should all get some sleep at some point so we can do the 70 things on our list tomorrow.
That's right.
You probably have more than we do, being in the classroom and having a million kids needing you every single second. So
you're fantastic, though, Josh. It's totally worth it.
Oh, I know, and there are days where I'm in classrooms and I'm having a great time, and I'm like, I kind of miss this. Like,
Do
and then
you?
I
Do you
think about
miss
the things
it?
I don't miss.
absolutely,
But
every day.
but there are definitely times it's like, man, I just want my own group of these people again.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, is there anywhere that people can learn a little more about your adventures and the things you're up to?
Sure. Twitter is really my PLN. I'm still like PLC because we had PLC this morning. So I'm like, wait, let me make sure I use the right acronym. Yeah, I'm at Ortiz numeral 4. Ortiz teach numeral 4 ELL. I tweet a lot on the weekends. I got to be honest with you, I'm so focused on my kids that I'll take pictures and I'll be like, oh, I got to tweet this. And then I'll look at it like 3 weeks later and I'll go, oh, dude, I totally forgot to tweet that. But I'll retweet stuff. I do. It's been a great resource for kind of my own learning. And Mandy showed me how to do the tweet deck. So now I know how to do that, which is kind of awesome. Yeah. Whoop, whoop. But I'm relatively new to the Twitters. So that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. It's on the Twitters.
Cool. Well, we will be sure to continue these connections and stories out there on that platform. We'd like to go ahead and thank our listeners for tuning in once again to Stories in EDU. We don't have a podcast, so we don't have people who listen to it. We do enjoy talking, though, so we'd probably still do it anyway. But in any case, thank you, and we hope that you were inspired or laughed a little bit. Maybe you learned something and that you continue to listen, and maybe you've subscribed on iTunes or Google Play or YouTube or the million places that you could. Hopefully you picked one and didn't do them all because that's a lot of bombardment. But in any case, we appreciate all of you that are listening to this, whether this is your first time or your 20th time. And we hope that you continue to join us every Tuesday as we release new episodes. So on behalf of Mandy and myself, thank you. And we can't wait to see you on the next episode of Stories in EDU. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Stories in EDU podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, thanks again.
Every educator has a story to tell. What story will you tell at storiesinEDU.com? Do you want your best story published? Well, here's an opportunity. The Stories in EDU book contest is looking for amazing people like you to write their true story for publication. Choose a category: overcoming obstacles, relationships, voice and choice, hooks, technology use, and that one kid. You don't want to miss this opportunity to tell your favorite story from inside your classroom or your building. More info at storiesinEDU.com. Let's share your best story. Submit today at storiesinEDU.com. We're waiting for your story.